Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Talent Equation. Good to have you back. A bit of a different kind of podcast this week. This is one that I recorded live while I was up at the UK Coaching Conference up in Edinburgh at the Scottish National Performance Centre, fantastic facility called Orium. And while I was there, I started having a conversation with Paul Bell, who is the national coach for squash in Scotland. And we just sat down to talk about a variety of different things. And while we were there, I thought, this is a great conversation. Let's press record. So the sound quality isn't exactly brilliant. You might have to turn up the volume to be able to hear Paul, because my recording device wasn't exactly on point, and you can hear a little bit of background noise. But there's enough in there, I think, to make sure that everybody gets some really good insights. Paul's really interesting guy, working really hard, and rarely do you get to meet somebody who is prepared to be so open, so vulnerable, willing to learn, take on new ideas, and find different things. And all power to him. And I think Scottish squash is in extremely good hands based on the conversation we had today. So anyway, I give you Paul Bell.
I came into this role 2 years ago now, so it's halfway through the Commonwealth Games cycle.
Oh God, that's hard.
Yeah, it was really hard. So to try and invoke any change, so you go into a new role and you think, right, we could do this better, we want to change this, I want to change that, I want to change that, but then you're halfway through a cycle, and you think, right, okay, what little improvements can I make to what we're already doing so we don't completely derail us on the journey that we're on. So that was an interesting kind of biting your tongue and looking for little marginal gains here and there. Experience for me, and it was really good to have the ability to do that. But now it's kind of blank slate, and we get the opportunity to think about all the things and how they all link in together. And I think it's really important that we identify the skills that we're looking for from the players and how the coaches can influence that, as opposed to the way around, just be like, right, what do we need to coach? Squash historically has been a really technical focused coach education model. It's a technical game, but it's the easiest part of it to coach. So therefore you can, when it comes, I think, coach education side of it, they just want to provide resources. It's like, as long as we give them information that they can see that they can use it in some form, then the applicants will be happy, the candidates will be happy. Whereas that's not going to translate to making better squash players for us. It's about the mental aspects that we're trying to develop. How can you build a relationship so you understand the player enough to have an influence on them and influence their thinking, and then the kind of technical aspect of it comes last, because that's the easy bit. But we jump straight to the easy bit, so we get people over the line to say, right, okay, you can teach something. But then once we get to, so we lost out in the fourth playoff in the Commonwealth Games, third time in a row that we've come fourth, and it's just, it can't be a coincidence that there's something in the way that we're developing players that when they get into those crucial moments that they revert back into something, and they from what I've seen, they revert back into just playing the game and in a technical way.
Right.
So I'm going to hit the ball in this way, go back to that, rather than just kind of getting stuck in, and the winning mentality kicks in and you make the decisions that you need to make in order to put yourself in the best possible position to succeed.
Find a way.
Yeah, find a way to make it happen. And it's quite difficult to teach that, isn't it? And we would never think of teaching that from a junior perspective.
Really?
All the way down. Well, if you look at the level 1, level 2, level 3 model, like there's none of that stuff is in there.
So if it's anything like most level 1, level 2, level 3, or more level 1, level 2, it's about, right, these are the techniques of the game that every individual must experience and develop some level of mastery on, and the basis of that thinking rationale is, once you've got the technical mastery, then you can do the other things. That's the fundamental. Whereas my contention, as you know, has always been, actually, this is the game. This is the problems. These are the problems that the game's going to throw at you. And there's a load of ways of solving those problems that we're definitely going to work through and explore. But you have to have a really in-depth understanding of the game as a starting point.
Absolutely. And you've talked about it a lot, but drills and stuff like that are just taken away completely from experiencing that game and experiencing that, like the amount of issues that I'm having to try and tackle with senior players, and it's a commonality all the way down the pathway to the really young players as well. It's just simple things that are the byproduct of just doing drills all the time, not watching the ball. You already know where the ball's going, so why am I going to bother watching the ball anymore? So, and then they get into a match and they don't know where the ball's going, and they're not watching for it, so then they're rushing around the court all over the place. All these sort of little things, but it's just because drills are the easy thing, aren't they? Like, if you can give anyone a set of drills to explain how to do them and say, right, okay, go for it, and without really exploring and like getting down into the detail of why you're doing it. Drills are like, you can use them as long as there's an emphasis on something that you're trying to work on that's going to relate back to the game, not just doing this because you're hitting a squash ball a few hundred times in a session and therefore, well done, you're getting better at squash.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I'd love to know where it comes from, but very often when an individual in a performance context makes for example, they have some kind of performance failure, let's say, they don't achieve their goal, they come fourth instead of third or whatever. When they analyse that, they usually can probably point to a couple of things that maybe that didn't happen, and they're usually to do with, like you say, kind of perception, and them connecting the dots between kind of what they were experiencing and what they were aware of, and then how that then manifests itself in choices, the decisions they make and the actions they take. And then when they look to them with their coach, for example, when they look for the solution to that and what they're going to work on, they double down on the technical. More technical. If I get more technical, get better technically, that will solve my problem. But hang on a second, you just a minute ago said that there's a perception component or an awareness component linked to that. But I just got to get the technical bit done.
That's it. It's kind of measurable though, isn't it, for them, a lot more, so they can see. So we're trying to, in the improvements and the changes that I'm trying to make, bringing in my ideas of the game in a lot more, because now I've got that blank slate that I talked about. While it's a movement aspect that I'm trying to work on within the game, it's bringing to light like their psychological approach to how they're doing it, to how they're doing it and what they're thinking about as they're doing it. It's bringing into play how they're dealing with setback, and the initial response to failure, and there's all these other, it's just growing arms and legs just constantly, because all I'm trying to do is improve someone's movement, but then it gets down to a little bit of technical hitting, and it gets down to the physical attributes that they have, and then it's what approach are they taking, are they getting enough training load in, are we really engaged in the process? Do we really want to make that change, and are we prepared to just, I don't know whether it's get stuck in or just, I think a lot of it is be prepared to fail.
Yeah.
And just put themselves in that situation and keep working at it. Because a lot of these, I don't know whether hopefully you can shed some light on it, but for me what I'm finding, because they're probably round about, the ones that aren't getting it are the 17 to 21 year olds, who the older players that I work with, the pros, like they get it, they're experienced enough to understand what I'm talking about, but the younger ones, they're just looking for me to tell them how it's going to work. So then, right when we're talking about something, right, I want you to create this feeling in your body of how you're making something happen. And they just go like, oh, well, it's not working, what should I do? And it's just like, well, actually, you just really need to be patient and go through the process and keep trying it, really be determined that you're going to find it and understand that it's going to take a bit of time. But if it doesn't happen instantly and there isn't a outcome-based situation that they can measure themselves against, and they really struggle with that. I don't know whether you found anything like that before.
Definitely. I've had, in different context and very maybe manifests itself slightly differently, but I've definitely had experiences where trying to encourage 17-year-old, 16-year-old to do things that they're not comfortable doing, like they've not done before, in a performance context, or so I'm framing the environment as a learning environment, right? And in order to learn, we definitely can't be just getting it right every time. We're definitely not, because it's fundamentally linked to the learning process is actually some aspect of getting something wrong or refining something that isn't quite where it needs to be. So there has to be some struggle. And I'm minded of Carol Dweck, who, when she said, you've got to love the struggle. So framing it around that kind of space, so that in this space, we come here to struggle. We don't come here to have answers and immediate solutions, and things like that. We come here to struggle. And actually, part of being a performance athlete and elite athlete is to embrace struggle, because we value it so much for our growth. We don't come here to just perform like seals and get it right. We come here to struggle, and it's, I suppose, trying to frame an environment in that way and getting them bought into the idea of that's why we're here. And I'm not saying I've got the answer to that, and it is a very big challenge, because what you've got to remember as well is that these particular individuals are all about identity. They're finding their identity in the world, and for many of them, their performance at the sport they're involved in is wrapped up in their identity. Contingent self-worth, they call it. And so it's a threat to be vulnerable and go, here's something I can't do, and this is something that I need to develop. And so I can understand the need to reject that, and what they're looking for you to do is to just give them the fix, aren't they? So they just give me the fix. But that's not where the learning comes from, is it? Get rid of fix, Yeah,
totally. Vulnerability is a word that keeps on coming up in a lot of these conversations that I have with people. So many people are just unwilling to be vulnerable. I can remember my journey as a coach. Like, I'm still 31 and national coach of Scottish squash now. I've been here for 2 years, and there's no way. My first international coaching job was with Ireland when I was 22, and I was at the European Championships trying to coach the world number 3 woman. As a 22-year-old, she's 30 and massive performer, unbelievable what her level was in comparison to me.
How did you get that gig?
Coaching. Well, they're all really. A lot of these countries in squash are really small. They don't have much resources, and they had a national coach, and I was over there working in a club, my first coaching job, and I just wanted to try and get a bit of experience, try some new things. I was just so eager to learn. I'm just like, I'll do anything, just like, if you give me the opportunity, then I'll come along and do my best, and I just want to learn as much as possible. And then I did a couple of squads shadowing the national coach, and then he couldn't make it over to one, so they said, oh, would you just do it yourself? And he sent me the lesson plan, and I followed it and did the session for the players, and they said they really enjoyed it and they liked my way of doing things and me as a person. We built up a good relationship, and then they said they needed another coach to go along because there was a men's and women's team at the that were competing at the European Championships. They needed 2 coaches. Would I go too? So I went along to that, and the national coach said, well, he would take the men's team, why don't you take the women's team, and then it'll give you a bit of experience of just like working with the team. And I was really grateful for the opportunity, and the national coach was great. He could easily have just done it all himself, but he wanted to give me the experience. And then, but yeah, I think the key thing was I didn't go in saying I know everything, I'm a great coach, so therefore you need to listen to what I say. I was just there open and said, right, I'm young, I'm learning, I want to become as good a coach as I can. Like, what do you think? And then let's have a discussion, and let's see if we can together come up with an answer that might help you here. And actually in that first match, the woman who I was coaching, she was far and above a better player than this girl that she was playing, but she lost the first game, and I was like, oh no, what's going on here? Like, what am I going to say to her? She's just lost the first game. There's no ways that she should have. And like, she was a bit nervous, and there was some, like, she just wasn't firing at all, and she's just like, I said, so what do you think? How was that? What do you think you need to do now? And she said, well, what do you think? And I was like, so that kind of eased me off straight away to be like, right, she actually wants me. But I was half expecting to just say, go away, I need to sort myself out. But like, the fact that she wanted my input, and I gave her a bit of advice, but it was more just starting the conversation so she could actually settle herself down and start to think rationally and clearly. And then it was just those experiences that really helped me to build up a coaching philosophy that was based around working together. Don't be a dictator in this situation. The players are the ones that are getting the real experiences. We have had past experiences and we can see what's going on from a different perspective, but we can, as coaches, just push our opinions and thoughts on them, because what we're seeing from the sidelines might be completely different to what they're actually feeling on the court. So we need to encourage them to share them as much as possible. And we have, like, over the years now, I've had so many variety of different athletes. There's some that just want to be told what to do, there's some that want to have the conversations, there's some that want to tell you everything, and you need to be adaptable to that. But the common trend has always been that the ones that have become the most successful are the ones that are leading the process for themselves, that are there, they're thinking for themselves, they're doing, and you're just there just to add a little bit. And I think coaches get a bit scared of that and try and beat that out of people, because they're saying, no, I'm the expert here, you need to listen to me, like, I need to be able to post on Twitter that I've produced you, or whatever it might be, and like, your results are my results, so I'm taking ownership of this.
Right.
And I've certainly found that a lot in squashes. Squash seems to produce a lot of them for some reason. I don't know why. I think there's a lot of decisions to be made in squash, and there's a lot of variables in squash, so coaches get really involved, and it's a passionate game, and I think that it leads to somebody just wanting to say, you need to do this, do that, and you'll be fine, when that's never the case.
So you always knew you wanted to be a coach?
Yeah.
And your developmental journey, so at 22, what did you do? Did you do a degree in coaching, something like that?
No, I did a degree in sport technology. which was totally random. So I wanted to do a degree in sports coaching, and my teacher at school said, there's no point going to uni and doing a sports coaching degree. You could just do your coaching qualifications and you'll get the same thing. So I was like,
which isn't actually wrong.
No,
it's another big problem. It's another big problem in our system.
Yeah, it's not wrong. But I really, really wanted to go to university. So I was just like, alright, well I won't do that, I'll just do a different course instead.
Right.
Even though I knew I wanted to be a squash coach. So I went and did sports technology, like did great in all the sports sciencey stuff, and then as part of that I had to do like engineering, mathematics, all this sort of stuff that I just did terrible in. But the biggest part of it was learning to adapt to a new environment, all the communication skills that you develop. Like Carlisle, where I'm from, is a pretty small town that you kind of know everyone, or like because I was pretty good at squash, word got around and everyone knew me, so it was always an easy connection to meet people and things like that. But you go and you just complete nobody in this new, I went to Liverpool, so new place, complete nobody, no one's there as your friend, and you just need to find a way, and you get put into these challenging situations at university to do presentations and things like that you need to learn how to communicate well and how to work as a team and in groups and things like that. So the confidence that I got from those type of things were way more valuable than the piece of paper that said I had a degree. And I probably couldn't have done coaching, certainly not to the level that I do it, without that experience, because it's so much about being a good communicator, understanding different types of people. And if you've never been in a variety of environments, then you're not going to be able to understand that at all. So it was difficult, but all the time I was coaching all the way through. My dad was the manager of the squash club in Carlisle, and a coach, and I started coaching from 14, did the little kids, and just all the way through I was coaching. I went to Liverpool, John Moores, and I coached the squash team at University of Liverpool.
Right.
And then as soon as I got out of university, I just started coaching again. And this whole time I had my dad in my ear saying, you shouldn't be a squash coach, you make no money, hours are terrible, like all this stuff, like don't do it, go and do something else. And so I was kind of half in, half out, because I was listening to him a bit, as you would if your dad's offering you advice, but the heart ruled the head in the end, and I just got to a point that I'm just like, right, I just want to give it a chance. So then that's when he ended up going to Galway in Ireland. So I'd been applying for all these different types of jobs, hadn't even got an interview for any of them, and then once I decided, right, I'll apply for a squash job and see what happens. Applied for 3, got offered all 3 on the same day, and then it was just like, okay, let's go for it and let's see if we can make something happen here. I think in terms of development wise, like I did the qualifications, I'd been through an England junior system as a player, I knew a lot of coaches, I knew a lot of people, I was fascinated with the game, which helps. I'd spent a lot of time playing and being around squash. But from a coaching perspective, I was just prepared to coach anyone.
Right.
That £5 or £10, like if I turned it down, my dad would have said to me, what are you doing turning down money? But I just wanted to go on, so I coached. Like we did coaching for a disabled school. There's no such thing as para squash, but we've got like disability and learning difficulty schools in to offer them the opportunity to do some squash. We did 50 kids on 2 courts at squash.
That'll challenge your coaching methodology, won't it, working with disabled kids?
Definitely, and that was it. And I was just prepared to do anything. There was a guy that came who couldn't see out of his left eye, and like you got a 360 view playing squash, so everyone had just said, oh, you can't play squash. And I was just like, yeah, I'll take you on, see what we can do. And like anything, people that were just saying, oh well, I can't run much, I was just like, well, we can plan a session around not having to run much. And people that couldn't hit it, it was just, everything was a challenge that I wanted to try and see if I could find a way to entice people into the game but help them to improve. And I just kind of got that bug for creativity and innovation within the sessions that I was doing. I was doing a lot of sessions, so like one-to-one coaching I was probably doing 30-40 hours a week, as well as groups, and then I'd go off and do different things. England squash started to help me out with opportunities and doing different groups and different junior squads and things like that. And I think because I was so keen to learn and so keen to try things out, I just put myself around a bit and didn't say no to anything or anyone, and got a couple of really good older coaches who mentored me really well in an informal way. It was no like formal mentoring, but just allowed me to have discussions with them. We talked a lot. I watched them coach. I saw what I liked and what I didn't like, and pretty much I've seen so many good coaches over the years. But my biggest thing was, I think probably for the first 2 years I copied coaches.
Yeah.
So I just went, saw who I thought was a good coach, went to see what they were up to, and just copied them.
Yeah.
And then obviously I did some good sessions as a result of that, but it was never that authentic.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, for whatever reason, I just started challenging, not the coaches themselves because they had their own way of doing things, but challenging my thoughts rather than just going and being mesmerised by these coaches. I just started going and be like, well, I like that, but I don't really like that. Like, I don't understand why they're doing that. And then I started going to these coaches and pretty much picking apart the things that I thought that could be better.
Yeah.
And then just deciding that I would go watch, make it better. How can I make that session better? How can I be better than them? How can I be better than them? And not that I'm saying that I am better than these coaches or anyone else, but just as soon as I kind of created my own coaching philosophy, my own coaching style, and what I valued as a coach from a player's perspective, it just transformed things.
I often think about it using the analogy of cooking. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit like, when you start out, you get the recipes.
Yeah.
You follow the recipes, don't you?
Totally.
And then after a while, you start to mess around with the odd additional ingredient and maybe different seasonings or whatever it might be. And then eventually you're actually coming up with your own.
Yeah.
You're going actually, and you're combining things. And then I think when you get to that real genuine mastery stage, that's when you're like the Heston Blumenthal's of this world. It's like molecular gastronomy.
Yeah.
So you're actually beginning to almost do different things that people never thought possible with methods and approaches and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So and that's just the journey. You're always on that journey, aren't you? Yes. But I always that analogy always seems to come back to me as a useful reference point.
That's a really good one, actually. Yeah, I've never thought about it. I'm always trying to relay the messages that I'm trying to put across to the players with like different things and bringing in different sports or different experiences. I always seem to find myself coming back to driving a car for some reason, but everything seems to have an analogy about driving cars. But I'm not even a car fan, but there we go. It's but yeah, that's a really good one, and I think from a coach's perspective and from watching and like coach education side of it, people rather than being, my philosophy was I wanted to get rid of the like drills and the things that I learned from the levels as quickly as possible.
Right.
Whereas I think a lot of people become dependent on them, that they want to. So I think.
What made you do that then? What was what gave you the insight to think this is not the model? This is not what I want to do.
I just wanted to do it differently.
Really?
Yeah, I just wanted.
Was it based on an idea around skill acquisition and athletic development and all those sorts of things, or was it just this idea of you wanted to find your own way that wasn't the traditional way?
Probably to begin with, it was I got bored.
Right. Okay.
Like just following the same model, doing the same type of exercise.
It is soul destroying, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't understand why people do it.
No, that's it. Like that idea that how many years have you been coaching? Have you done 10 years? Or have you done 1 year and repeated it 10 times type thing? And that was where I was feeling it. I don't have that good of an attention span when it comes to stuff like that. Like, but books and things like I have to listen to audio books, and it has to be, so if I'm just sat there doing the same thing, and if I repeat it over and over again, can't even have the same meals 2 weeks in a row. I just want to like try new things all the time.
Okay.
And so it kind of just became a bit soul destroying. Like I was doing a lot of lessons and a lot of sessions, so if I was just doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So it started by me trying out things as I was feeding and doing stuff, just kind of not messing around, but if I just sat there doing the same technique over and over again, then I'd probably get a repetitive strain but a repetitive strain injury, but it just started getting me thinking, and because I was trying things, I was just like, oh, have a go at this, so you like, because I was just trying to spark the enthusiasm of, generally at that point it was kids that I was coaching. And I was lucky that the coach that I worked with in Ireland, he was really innovative and he wanted to do things a different way too, so he was just like, well, why don't we try things that way? And then I would throw things into the mix and he would say, oh, that's really good, why don't we try this? And then suddenly it just exploded with us doing all these like weird, wonderful, wacky things, and we've got these players being like, what is going on? But then the proof was in the pudding, because we took Ireland from never really being, from a junior perspective, never really being even top 10 contenders to, I think the year before I left, every team was in the top 5 in Europe, and like suddenly people were really connecting with this new way of doing things and trying out different things. So I think it was just because it was different. Nobody was saying, God, this is life changing, this is completely a better way of doing it, but they just really liked the fact that it was different.
I love that. The driver there was me thinking, was the driver that you'd gone and read something about skill acquisition, this and the other. No, the driver was, you got bored. It was a search for variety. Interestingly, I think that, reflecting on that, I think that's probably similar for me as well. I didn't want to coach the way that I hated to be coached. Whenever I was playing, whenever I was involved in sport and this, that and the other, I would always search for something to make it more interesting, more exciting. How can we dial up the competition? I was always, my friends used to say to me all the time, oh, here he is again, let's make a league. I always wanted to, because for me it was always like, let's just spice it up somehow, and I suppose that was just selfishly kind of like what I got out of the sports experience, so I kind of wanted to give that to others. And from my own selfish perspective, it was more exciting. The interesting thing about kind of working in this space, as I have been for the last probably decade, previous 15 years of coaching, maybe thereabouts, I never got into flow, ever.
Yeah.
And since I've changed my kind of philosophy and approach and embarked on this kind of journey around ecological dynamics, I get into flow. I'm not saying every time, because I think I'm still too kind of cognitive of what I'm trying to do. But there's times when it happened to me last week. Came off the session, honestly, I was almost like spent, because I was just in it, and I'm loving every second, and I come away from it, and I'm like, bloody hell, it was brilliant. And and so from that perspective, this is something I'd never even experienced. So going back to what we were saying earlier about, it being soul destroying, it's like you say, people do become quite reliant on it, but it's so mechanical.
Yeah.
The joy is gone.
That's it. There's no wonder, because I think part of it was the fact that I knew if I was going to make a career out of coaching, and I was 22-year-old at this point, that I had a lot of years of coaching ahead of me, and if I was just going to do this type of coaching for the rest of my career, for the rest of my working life, I was just going to lose the love of it and get so, my soul would be destroyed, as you say. And then you start to look back at it and think logically, and just right, at what point do kids start being a bit bored of it, of the sport, and start dropping out? And it's at 16, 17 mark where there's lots of other opportunities, but it's also where you've probably done the same thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them maybe got close to not perfecting it, but a good level of what you're doing, and you just think, well, I'm a million miles away from being world number 1, and so let's just try something else. Get a bit of variety in there. Whereas if you can keep providing variety in your sport, then you'll keep them in.
Limitless exploration. And that's the thing that I have to say I love. I mean, and to use some of the language, one of the things I talk about quite a lot at the moment is this idea of a landscape of affordances, and it's infinite in any context. So I mean, I'm involved in a sort of dynamic team game, so it's infinite because you've got no idea what the other person's going to do, or the other group, the team, and what my teammates are going to do, and the conditions and the situation I'm in and all that sort of stuff. So it's infinite, and exploring that landscape to a lesser or greater extent is enormously rewarding, and and guiding people through that exploratory journey, because it's a jungle, right? So for a lot of people it's a jungle, and it's just there's too, you're hacking at weeds, you don't make any progress. So I get that. So what the job is to in my opinion is to sort of part some of the the kind of foliage a little bit, so that they can see a bit of a path a little bit, and then the exploratory journey is one that you've sort of guided a little, but there's still lots of routes they could take, but you're putting them up, as opposed to them just blundering around in the jungle and getting kind of a bit frustrated. So there's a process there. But what I love about that is the discoveries they make as they come along, when they go, look what I found, and you go, isn't that awesome? And they go, yeah, and that's a great moment for me. They're the sort of things I live for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great way of thinking about it, actually, because that's pretty much what I'm having to do here. There's so many possibilities, there's so many areas that we could look to try and improve. Like, we don't have any world number ones, and even if we did have a world number one, there'd still be areas in a sport like squash that you would be looking to improve. Like, it's a never-ending pursuit of perfection. That we shouldn't even use the word perfection, because you're never going to get there. It's just you're constantly trying to improve, and you can get every match that you go on, there's probably something different that lets you down. So if you're just jumping from, right, this match I played and my mindset wasn't good enough, this match I played and I wasn't fit enough, this match I played and I tactically was nowhere near where I needed to be, you just jump in from, right, I'm going to improve this, and then, right, no, I need to improve that now, and then I need to improve that. So which is why sometimes I feel like I talk myself out of being a coach, because I say that coaches cause more harm than good in the way that they approach things, and I do believe that, but I also then talk myself back into being a coach in those situations, because it's saying, right, okay, coaches have got a wealth of knowledge and understand the game in such a way that what your job is to then make the decisions about what's the important thing to work on, and help them to work on those things and not get distracted by all the other things that could come along.
Absolutely. You're interestingly, I think what you're saying there is, when you say talking yourself out of being a coach, you're not talking yourself out of being a coach, you're talking yourself out of the popular misrepresentation of what coaching is.
Absolutely.
What people's expectation of coaching is. It's funny, we were observing some coaching sessions at the conference, and I was saying to people, I said, the strange thing is that when somebody's a really excellent practitioner, most people wouldn't see it as good, because it's not what they expect to see. What they expect to see is an information flow. They expect to see instruction. They expect to see, kind of whistle and stop and tell and this sort of thing. That's what they think is coaching. And when you see really great practitioners, they're kind of not that involved, and it looks like they're not doing anything, but they've got a great practice going on, and they're letting players, feedback and all those sorts of things. So this is one of the challenges I think we face, is getting people to understand what it actually is, and the process is, in my mind anyway, what coaching is about helping an individual to find things out about themselves and improve things about themselves, and guiding the journey. It's a navigator. Whereas I think a lot of people, basically you're the driver. A lot of coaches, they're all, I'm taking you with me, right? But I'm driving. You're sitting in your passenger seat. And that's not, go back to your car analogy, that's kind of where, and I 100% talk yourself out of that one every day.
It's funny though, because there are environments and the situations that draw you into that. Like, when I So I applied for the job here and originally didn't get it. Just said that I wasn't experienced enough, too young. I was 28 at the time, and they just said not experienced enough, despite having kind of.
And you're from England, right?
From England, yeah. But that wasn't an issue.
No, I know.
But yeah, too young, not experienced enough. But you did a really good interview. I had good feedback, so I was pretty pleased. And I thought, well, that's kind of the thing. But then it turned out that they didn't appoint anyone. So they decided not to give the job to anyone. And a few months down the line, it came up again. So I thought, well, I'll apply. It's good opportunity to get into your experience. You don't do that very often, and you never know. There was a new CEO in place, and it was a job that I really wanted, and I thought I could do a good job here. And what ended up happening was that I got offered a 3 months role.
Right.
So they said, do it for 3 months and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
And then
3 month audition.
Yeah, pretty much. Which was great from my perspective because I was getting an opportunity, and I could also see whether I liked the role as well. Because even it's
a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a national coach's position, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right job for you.
Yeah.
So I came in and did it, and the players had an expectation of what a coach was, and what
based on their previous experiences.
Previous experiences, yeah, and because it was like an audition, I found myself at certain times just like going into the you need to be a coach role.
Yeah.
Because rather than taking my normal thing of right, I'm gonna throw carrots out there and like see if who can get there first and like who's gonna bite, but instead it was just like, right, I need to prove to these players that I know what I'm talking about. I need to prove to them that I can run good sessions and all the rest of it. And it was a real to-in and throw-in for me. Like, if I had time to really think about it and I was in a good place and I was driving up and down from Carlisle starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I was leaving there at 3:30, and if I was just in a bad place, I'd just come and like be the coach that everybody wanted me to be, or everyone expected me to be. But then if I'd like stayed over instead, or if I was in a good mood and like everything was in a good place, then I would be the coach that I really wanted to be, that I knew would get the most out of the players, even if they didn't like it, because they're not used to that messiness, they're not used to being really challenged without an end product to say you did well or you did badly.
Right.
So you can totally see how people fall into the trap of that. Especially when they are aspiring to be in a certain position or get a promotion or whatever it might be. That it's really tough, and you've got to be really disciplined with yourself to like stick to your true values. And it was that journey that I went on where I started saying, I like that, I don't like that, I can see what he's doing, I can see what they're doing, but I'm not just going to copy. That's led me down this route that I was comfortable enough to back myself to be the coach that I actually wanted to be, that I knew would be the most effective, rather than...
So did you go in, you sort of went in and you weren't necessarily your authentic self because of the expectation, and then what you did you row back from that as you became more established?
Yeah, I totally... Once I felt a little bit more comfortable, I put my stamp on it, and like I was toing and throwing, but I was always looking for feedback. I talk to the players to understand what they're wanting, and what they're liking about the sessions, what they're not liking about the sessions. And what tended to be the case was that it was the feedback when I was this expected coach was there wasn't any. It was just like, yeah, it was fine, good session, like, because the drills were good and they put a bit of hard work in, and then that was fine. Like, that ticked the boxes for them, and that's what they were looking for. But when I was my authentic self and really challenging them and making it messy and all the rest of it, it was a bit like Marmite. Some of them were just like, oh, that felt great, that was amazing. Like, I could totally see what you were talking about, and I could totally feed it on the court. I think that'll really help me. And others were just like, I didn't like it, didn't get into any rhythm, I wasn't able to ease myself into it, and all these things. I just like, why do you ease yourself into it in a match? Like, I had to think too much. Like, do you not think in a match? I couldn't understand what was going on. Like, are you not challenging anything? And so even though it's negative feedback, I was just like, this is so important. We've got to keep nailing this, because these are all the things that you need to be able to deal with in a competition, in a match.
Yeah.
But you're shying away from training those attributes in a training environment.
Yeah.
So it was kind of that kick of the backside, that feedback, that even though it would have still been easy to just do the things that was getting neutral feedback, so like I was still trying to get a job that I wanted, so it would have been really easy to do that and just let them get the job, tick it off, and move on. But I really wanted to, if I was going to make an impact on the players and make a change and improve the results of Scottish squash, then I had to work through those issues and make sure that all the players were feeling that on a regular basis.
Amazing. So you said you wanted to pick my brains, so what's on your mind?
So there's a few things that I've got a list of cards. So I wanted to make sure. So it was about kind of the first response. The thing that's really holding us back in all of this new stuff that we're trying to work on is players' initial response to setback, to failure. Because squash is like bang, 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 you get in seconds in between every shot that you hit. So as soon as you go off, you play a bad shot that catches a side wall or something, if you're not focused on your opponent hitting the ball, you're more focused on the fact of how bad of a shot I played because I have caught the side wall. I'm not happy with that. I'm still thinking about that, and now I've missed the opportunity, and then it all unravels really, really quickly. So what have you got any kind of advice for how you deal with that? Because it's it's not a genetic thing, but it's a group dynamic that this is always the thing that's unraveling us, and it's a common thing amongst the whole set of players. Have you had any experience of it?
Well, yes, or at the very least we can explore this, because your context is different, obviously. So for example, it might be helpful to, because you mentioned about like touching the sidewall, so explore that a bit, or bring that to life for me in terms of using that as a error, let's say. Right. How do you work with players around that kind of a thing? I mean, I just need you to sort of bring that to life for me, and then I can hopefully dig into it.
Well, I mean, it's the technical aspects of executing the shot. But they can all do that. They can all do it under pressure, and I think that's the thing. They've got an expectation of themselves of how they hit the ball, the way that they can hit it, the shots that they can execute. So when it becomes more in a match situation, then they start to make mistakes, as you would, like the variables change and different things are happening. But rather than just being able to separate themselves from it, like just say, okay, that's going to happen, let's see if I can deal with the next result, or the next situation that I'm going to be in. The issue isn't the fact that they hit the side wall, the issue isn't the mistake that they make. That's just going to happen in a game when you're hitting the ball so many times in a short space of time at speed. The issue is their response to it, and the way that they are getting distracted by the fact that how badly they executed the shot that they feel like they should be able to.
So the challenge then is the reaction to the shot that's against their expectation. So their expectation is to perform the shot a certain way. They don't perform the shot in a certain way, and their reaction to the that is that it takes them out of being in the present, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for a fleeting second, which is usually can often be enough to create a cascade, which then means that they're essentially always out of it because they're kind of then on the back foot. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay. So, question then: how often, or how do you create environment, or have you ever created an environment where one of the things you've asked the players is for them to self-monitor around in a game or a rally? You know, because squash at the elite level, from my observations of it, you know, you're getting really extended rallies, aren't you?
Yeah.
You know, and so for them to report back to you the amount of times they came out the present.
Not in that way. So it's more, I put them in the situations. Most of my sessions are pretty open. We'll put them in the situation where they will be coming out of the present quite a lot. And even if
How would you do that?
a lot of match play, so just general match play stuff, which will drag them into those situations, and then just like conditioning the games, or really, and forcing them in to even more difficult conditions. So
Go on.
so it will be like they have to only play certain shots.
Right.
So they're only allowed, and then they have to follow them in sequence. So I'll say, right, one player can only play straight drives, and every time it hits the side wall, then they are able to do something different, and like it's making them always aware of the mistakes that they're making, and then the other person's going to take advantage of that. It has the opportunity to take advantage of that.
Right.
So these mistakes are happening more and more and more.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to encourage them to just take that on the chin. Like, we know that these mistakes will happen, and it's the other person's then going to attack you, which is what would happen in a match. And you just need to deal with the fact that you're now going to be on the back foot, and how can you deal with that situation as well as possible.
Is that usually a moment where attack turns into defence? Because it gives the other person the opportunity then to take. So they might have been in defensive mode, they're sort of in recovery. It then gives them the opportunity to sort of take the initiative in the rally, fleetingly.
Totally.
But that changes a lot, doesn't it? From my observation.
It changes a lot if you bring yourself back.
Right.
So the issue with our players is that as soon as that changes, they never bring it back, because they're still so annoyed at the fact that they give their opponent the opportunity.
To the point where they almost like give up on the point.
Yeah, they wouldn't give up on the point, but they are no longer thinking about what they're trying to do in a logical way.
And how they can wrestle the initiative back.
Yeah. So
really?
Running, I'll get that ball back.
So then they're in purely reaction mode.
Yeah.
And so they're not, at that point, they're no longer thinking about a tactical opportunity to then wrestle the initiative back.
No.
Really? So I suppose, do you? I'm assuming you do this, but do you ever have scenarios where that's their starting point, being on the back foot?
Yeah.
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 And do you play it whereby their job is to get the initiative?
Yeah. So it's all these type of things, but when the pressure in these such scenarios, they've come from this background of the value of what they were doing was working hard,
right?
Not thinking hard. So as long as you come off dripping with sweat, you give it everything, then that's okay. And when you're in defense mode, you can kind of just do that.
Yeah.
And that's their go-to. As soon as they end up in a situation where they're in defense mode, like instincts kick in, and they just throw themselves around the court. They pick up everything, and it's like superhuman what they manage to get back. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But none of it's ever lead into an improved performance. None of it's ever lead into getting themselves back into a positive position. It's just, I'm going to show how many squash balls I can pick up when I'm under pressure and how hard I can work. And it just seems to be this.
And is there a bit of a point of pride about that?
Oh yeah, totally. Like they are really proud about the fact that they work hard, they're fit, like they do all these things. But that overtakes the idea of actually just winning the game or trying to perform as well as possible.
Yeah.
So
is the problem that you're trying to solve here partly about how can you get them to accept the minor error really, but it's small margins, isn't it? Is to accept it immediately, so not to dwell on it, or is part of the problem around that kind of tactical appreciation that there's a job to be done now, as in, yes, I'm on the back foot now, but we're not staying here. There is a job to be done, which is to get ourselves back to the position where we can.
Yeah, the second one, I think, is kind of thinking clearly under pressure. And the scenarios and all the things that you would expect someone to put them in, or the environments that would put them in, the different scenarios that I'll put them in, there just doesn't. There seems to be something bigger than that, which is preventing them from really just.
How do you play with the pressure dial?
A lot of it is in the moment pressure. So like you compete a lot as a squash player. You play a lot of matches, so therefore you get that pressure from there. So in the training environment, it's very difficult to create that because it's such false pressure.
Indeed.
And everyone gets it. So that's probably something that like you do try and put it in. So it's like physical punishment, mental punishment. Although I don't like the word punishment, repercussions.
Consequences.
And just putting them in scenarios that are difficult, and you can say, right, you're starting 6 love down, and all these types of little things, but because they're so used to the pressure and they experience it so much, the real pressure, that the false pressure always feels false.
Yeah. So I was trying to work that out about what options are available to you around, because I think that's clearly part of the variable here, in the sense of you kind of want them to be, kind of really feeling it, in order to try and somehow equate the moment they're going to be in that match context. But you're right, the problem is it's very difficult to do because it's false. So I'm just trying to think what options are available to you that actually reduce the falseness, if you like. So for example, stuff I've done in the past, and you can play with this or not, is running an ongoing like battle board, very public, amongst the group, around kind of like, so I quite often will play like quite in hockey, we play quite a few small-sided games. So each team has a battle board, or we have a battle board up, and it's like, we'll keep a record. And what happens then is, over the period of time, it really starts to build, because as you get to a cumulative point, and actually the pressure then is driven by the genuine need to, I've just got to beat my compatriot. So actually they start putting quite a lot of pressure on themselves, which almost becomes as important as any other context they're going to play in. Not quite, but it equates somehow. And if you can create that context where the player's playing in that space, then you can start to explore, because they're at least playing in something that equates to the pressure. I don't know if you've done that.
No, not really. No, and this is one of the things that I'm starting to find now, is with good coaching, adding in to try and not just think about the technical and tactical, but the other things that actually facilitate the technical and tactical, and
emotional and psychological,
all that stuff. Is you need to be a full-time coach. You need to dedicate a lot of time to it off the court, and the planning aspects of it are so important, and thinking outside the box so important, just to bring to life situations that you'd never think of.
This was some advice I gave to you might have to be quite brave to do this, but I sense you like that anyway. When I was talking to Brett Holland, not in the podcast I did with him, but prior, he said one of his fears with the group he was working with was that they're really good, and they're going to come to a point of adversity, and they won't know how to deal with it, and they'll crumble because they're used to winning. And I said, well, okay, my advice to you is to do something that the special forces do quite a lot. So the military often use this phrase of no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Right.
So it's kind of similar to your issue here, which is your player has a plan around a shot they're going to perform that doesn't work out as they expected, and it sends them into a tailspin, right? So it's similar. So the military basically, they work on the basis we obviously have a plan, right? But we know it's not going to actually work out like that. And so the skill is in your ability to adapt in the moment, that's successful. And where this stems from is this idea of what used to happen with soldiers, by all accounts, in our military particularly, which were very command-led, right? Was the commander makes all the decisions. But what happens if he gets shot? So then the rest of the squad are like, what do we do now? And they go into chaos and they all get killed. So what they decided was, and this is actually something Mark Bennett brought into military training, particularly for officer training, is you need the soldiers to be decision makers too. And obviously they're going to respond to a leader's commands in a given moment because that's actually important. But if that leader's command isn't there for whatever reason, they still have to make decisions. And they have to be able to make them under clearly very high pressure, i.e. life and death pressure. Right? So that's kind of the where they built it in. So what they would do a lot of training in is what they call they would train in chaos all the time, and they would deliberately create. So Dave Aldridge used this phrase as Johnny Wilkinson's kicking coach: dislocated expectations. So it'd be training in contexts that were very unexpected, very uncomfortable, and like, what the hell's this? For instance, middle of the night, wake up in the back of a van, 4 of you, hardly any clothes, the van opens up, you're chucked out, that's it, right? What do you do? It's that kind of thing. And it goes back to the SEAL training, BUDS they call it, basic underwater demolition. It's their, they think of it as a physical challenge. It's not a physical challenge. The reason they do it is a mental challenge. Partly to see who has the mental capability to be able to get through such gruesome physical challenges, but it's also who works as a team. You can't complete BUDS if you don't work as a team. So what usually happens is the big, strong, I'm the man people, macho guys, they don't make it because they try and do it all themselves. They try and be but the ones who work together, they're the ones the SEALs want. So they do it deliberately. So they create these environments that are harsh in order to bring out the other elements in these individuals. Now, that's a challenge, isn't it? Because you go to something like BUDS and you expect it, it's going to be horrible. Your athletes probably won't expect it. So how we frame it's going to be really important, right? But so what I advised, coming back to what I advised Brett, was I said you need to create like the day of death, right? Where in one of your pre-season games or something like that, or one of your games in your season that you kind of know you're likely to win, that you know that you can play with, you need to create the day of death, right? So I was just exploring this with him, but right, so for example, you're going to give the team the wrong time, right, deliberately, right? So you're going to, the meet time is going to be later than it should be for them to get into the place, right? When you get there, the minibus isn't going to be booked, right? So you're already on the back foot, right? The whole team's on the back foot. I said because he's a very nice guy, right? Really nice guy. I said you have to be not yourself, right? You are grumpy, you have to get a player, and you have to chew them out. They know it's coming, but nobody else does, right? So you have to really give them a proper, something you would never do normally, right? You have to get to so you eventually get your minibus. You're in a massive rush to get to the game. You know that actually you're not going to have any time to prepare, right? There's no warm-up time. You're just going to be literally putting your kit on in the minibus on the way there, right? The minibus is going to break down a mile out from the game, right? And you're not going to break down, but it's going to break down, and the players are going to have to run there to make the game time. right? And they're going to have to literally go on there, chaos, throwing things on, and they're going to have to play this game. And they're not going to be in a great place, right? And it's all designed to. So what did we learn from that moment?
Yeah.
What did we learn from that day, right? That's not to say that every day is going to be like that. It's not. But you're sort of designing a whole environment of discomfort to see then how they react to that. And then, in principle, the theory behind that should be that it can deal with anything, deal with any adversity.
Yeah.
He didn't do it. He wishes he had, but he did. They developed adversity later on in the thing. So I'm thinking, with your context, is that what could you do similar, right? So how could you create? I mean, for example, so something we did when I was working in golf. Our national side, right? So England, right? We've got like 60,000 junior golfers or something like that, right? Maybe more than that, 60, 70,000 junior golfers. We've got 2,000 clubs, this, that, and the other. And we played in the European Championships and we came 14th, right? So like a bad year for England, right, needs to be like maybe third. Yeah. That's a bad year, right? Not 14th, right? Norway won it. It's dark half the year. They've got 4,000 players, right? And they've got about 100 clubs or something, and they won, right? I'm like, we're doing something wrong here. Turns out, we were in Czechoslovakia, it rained. And the players came back and said, we couldn't play in the waterproofs. I'm like, but you must have played in them before, yeah? No. Because the training was all in a driving range undercover. They'd never played in the rain.
Yeah.
So, for example, what I've said is, what we need to be doing is, right, is we need to get we're going to play a game, right? We're going to get the squad together, right? They need to arrive, right? It needs to be absolutely belting down, right? Go out and play. But before you go out and play, we're going for a 10-mile run. Then you're going to play, and the team that loses is going to do it again. This kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Now, I know that sounds really ridiculously harsh, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say is that if we can create that kind of training environment that has a great deal of adversity within it, and then we can get the players to explore how they can perform within that adversity, it then brings out some other elements. So it's very long-winded.
No, I think that's probably because, like, it comes down to my thing after we came back from the Commonwealth Games was, like, it's a cultural thing. Like, the culture within the group, the culture within the squad, the culture within the environment is far too easy.
Yeah.
We've got a great training facility, everything's free, like, we're begging people to come into it.
Right.
Because we don't have that many squash players, and anyone that shows a little bit of potential, like, we need you, we're giving them everything that they could need, it's free coaching, all the rest of it, and then it gets into these really tough moments, and they can't perform anywhere near to their capabilities, and they're just not used to that, and this is where I explored down the whole culture thing, and it was all very coach led. It was all, you told them you had to turn up here, and they could do it without thinking, and all of the things that I know are important to developing a good squash player weren't being developed, weren't being even tested in the slightest. And before, it'd have been very extreme 18 months out from Commonwealth Games to go from you've been given all this stuff to, right, you're not getting anything, you need to do it all for yourself.
Sure, yeah.
But now we've got we're not going to go that far down that route, but I like the idea of the things that you say in there, that when it's here, it's tough. When it's here, you are really going to be challenged. And this is a big thing with the success of the Scottish Squash programme in the past was based around numbers. And if we can get so many players to commit to coming into a centralised programme, then we're obviously doing really well.
Yeah.
But then we'd get 16 players into a centralised programme, and we'd get 3 players into the top 50 in the world. And you're only making money in squash if you get in top 30. A mediocre living at that. And so there's such a contrast between what we were trying to, like, what was perceived success and what was real life success. So if we had less players who had to fight harder to get into this environment, and then really were challenged when they were in it.
Yeah.
A lot of these things might stick a lot better, and they might be able to deal with these difficult situations a bit better.
Yeah. I mean, I think getting the players to, at the very least, what's the word? Buy in, own. You know, but getting them to at the very least state that they see that this would be a way of them improving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and getting their assent to do so is important, and framing it in the right way around this is about the best way for us to help you become the best version of you. So I think that will be key, because obviously it's not something if you don't do that, then obviously you're just being coach led again. But the challenge with this is probably going to be something they need, and it's not something they want. Right, so it's about getting people, which is, I think, the skill of coaching is get people to understand that they want things they need. You know,
totally.
And they have to understand that this is, again, it comes back to your point about framing things around struggle. You know, I mean, almost to the point of every single set, because this is a performance environment, right? So, like, if you don't value growth through struggle and adversity and challenge on the basis that this is what we do to help us get better, if you don't value that, then you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, totally.
And
at some stage it's going to come unstuck, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you might, like, the thing is, there are incentives for mediocrity in small countries. You can get a Scotland shirt and not be that great, not be that high a performer, not be worthy of being in a performance environment. So there's little incentives there to keep people in it.
Yeah.
But when you think about the whole culture that you're trying to create in order to really get to that top level, they're not the same thing.
I mean, if you get them to, for example, so like, again, something that Mark does, you know, he talks about things like rule of three and stuff. But everything he talks about within things like rule of three, or the UAEs, as he talks about, unacceptable, acceptable, exceptional, it's always about the individual framing what it looks like for themselves. So it's establishing a reality for themselves that they want to step towards. So when he creates excellence, or whenever I do this with players, you know, with an individual, I establish what excellence looks like for them. Right. You know, it's not saying this is my idea of excellence. What does excellence look like for you? As in, what do you want to look like? Right. And then the problem with the human psyche is that we'll do everything we can to sabotage that. It's just the nature of the beast. And I think the job of a coach is to be relentless in not allowing people to step back from the goals they've set for themselves, even though, and so they'll kick and scream, because it's hard. Because if it wasn't hard, everyone would do it, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
So if you could say to them, for example, and you know, I've framed it in a number of different ways, but one way you can frame it, for example, is to say, you know, tell me what I often will start from the unacceptable. What is an unacceptable way of being within our environment and our culture? People can often do the unacceptable quicker sometimes, because it's easier to evoke the negative. And then you go, right, so what's unacceptable? Right, so what would be acceptable for us? We can live with acceptable, that's okay. And then what's exceptional? And can we strive continuously for the exception? Probably can't live there all the time, but we're going to try and get there as much as we can, right? And the more we can be there, the better, right? So by framing that for them and saying, right, so your environment, your culture, you're asking for looks like this, right? And your role is, we're never coming back from there. I'm never going to let you. And the minute you do, well, and this is where the rule of three comes in, you should identify straight away when it is. If you're not where it needs to be, individually or as a group, then you need to identify that, and you can self-correct. You can see it, or you can peer correct. Are we where we need to be? And then third step is when we step in and say, are we where we need to be? You know, just avoid stopping human beings to self-sabotage is kind of a big part of coaching in my view.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But what I was going to say is the other way of framing it, for example, is I've framed it in different ways, lots of different tools. One is like what I call a pre-mortem.
Right.
So this is where you get people to basically describe the worst context. So, for example, we're going to go for the Commonwealth, right? What's the worst, right? Describe it in vivid detail, everything going wrong, and us going nowhere near where we need to perform. Describe everything about that, right? And by evoking that, we can then say, right, so this is your worst scenario. What would the best look like?
Yeah.
Right? And this is the outcome scenario, like that, and then row back from that, saying, right, to be there, what does our day-to-day need to look like to be there?
Yeah.
And then once they've established what their and you've probably done all of this, so forgive me if I'm
no.
If you're establishing in your environment culturally that to get there we need to our day-to-day needs to look like this, then you get something really tangible and measurable. Because the thing with culture often is it's quite hard to measure.
Yeah.
But if you can create tangible, so for example, culture is basically an aggregation of behaviours. So for example, if the behaviour is that the group agrees is that something that Clive Woodward used to say, for example, that being 5 minutes early is 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a silly thing. But if you then start to put some things like that, right? So this is our culture, and this is what we do. Then you're creating this kind of performance group think that then starts to drive a lot of other behaviour.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing, I totally get it, I totally buy into it. The biggest thing that I've found so far in this environment, and a lot of the environments that I've worked in, is really trying to not manage that but enforce it.
Yeah.
Because squash is not providing a full-time income for a lot of these athletes. Like the incentives that they're getting from it aren't anywhere near football or these big sports. They're probably having to study or part-time job alongside it, and really not just saying I understand. I totally understand why you slept in because you had to work till 11 o'clock last night, and the traffic was bad, and it's maybe what you're talking about with Brett. Just sometimes maybe a little bit too nice for your own good, and then it ends up just being like, alright, well if he can get away with it then I'll get away with it, and then I won't, I'll make sure I'm not. And then suddenly you just feel like God is falling apart around you.
This is the hardest thing for us as coaches, because I know exactly where you're coming from. I smiled when you said it, because every part of my fabric as a coach who's built to help people wants them to be, wants them to like it. And this is where Mark has a mega advantage. So some people describe him, if you've ever met him, if you ever meet him, some people describe him as a double hard bastard, military background, etc. Right, but he isn't. But I can understand why people think that, and the reason is because he's relentless. The reason he's relentless, and this is the piece that I think you have to get in my head, is because he understands that he's doing the athlete a disservice by not. But if he's not relentless, he's doing them a disservice because he's not doing the job that they asked for him to do, to keep them on the course towards the goals that they established, their excellence, not his, theirs. So if you let them off, then what you're doing is you're an enabler, and therefore what's your purpose? What you doing here? So he's relentless, right? Now not everyone likes it. If you work with you as a coach developer, right? So he's worked with me as a coach developer, and he asks you some questions, and you're squirming, right? And you're and you know deep down inside, really, that you just haven't lived up to the goals you established for yourself. And some people don't like that mirror being held up to them. It's painful, But he does it because, in his core, philosophically, he knows that he can't row back from that because he is not doing the job he's been asked to do, and that's the bit that it's hard to get to, but we have to get into that space. That we cannot allow the athletes to come. Well, you can give them the choice, by the way. You can say, you said this, right? We've got two choices now, right? We're either going to come back to it, and this is the question you often ask, or should we just change that? This isn't the goal anymore, is it? We're not doing that anymore. We'll create a new goal, and that's an uncomfortable conversation. People are like, no, I still want the goal. Oh, okay, but you're not doing the behaviours that add to the goal. Which is it going to be? So, anyway, it's a long again.
So how do you think that way of working and that approach is that effective or useful from like the junior perspective? I totally see how it works with the seniors that are committing to their sport and really want to achieve something to a high level.
Yeah.
But would that push away some of the like younger athletes?
It would if it wasn't done with the assent of the group. This is their excellence. Yeah. So if you were to do it, and this is where people, I think, they're uncomfortable with it because they think, oh god, it seems a bit tough, a bit performancy, and but that's based on the idea that it would be established by us. It's not established by us. You've said this is what you want your environment to look like. My role is to be a servant to that, and that means I might have to be relentless in retaining that culture, but that's because I'm doing it for you. And I can't afford. Funny enough, I do it with I'm coaching under 14 girls at the base of the talent pathway in hockey. 6 of them just want to have a chat about Love Island, right? And the other 6 actually want to do some stuff, right? So it's about establishing a culture to enable them to, and I saw the first question, right? Describe to me what you want your session to look like, and how you're going to act. I said we're going to be focused, we're going to have effort, and we're going to have a good attitude. They were the 3 things. And I said, okay, and you're going to try and be 10 out of 10 on focus, don't you? Within 2 minutes, they're gone. Right? They've lost it. Hello. What did we just say? Come back in. You said a minute ago that you want focus, effort, attitude. And all of a sudden, we've gone off there and done. Should we see how long we can do it for? And they're into it now, and they're kind of getting on board and all that sort of stuff. Now, they've never had it before. But again, it's all about the framing. You said this. I didn't say this. You said it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think again, if we're talking about personal growth, these things are really, really important because, again, what it helps you with as well is that if people aren't buying in, right? So we collectively say this. Often, what people say and do are very different. So you said this, and we're working on this, and then you start to see some individuals who really aren't there, and then you can have a different conversation with them. So there's a group here who have said this, and they're really living it, and you're not. So there's a choice to be made here because this is a group. The group I've got to be honest to the group, and it can be done individually as well. And I'm not saying it's all just about adherence and all those sorts of things because people are different, and I get all that, but each individual and each group kind of needs to know what it is they're after. And it's the bit that I think over the years, is the area I don't do well enough, the framing.
No, that's certainly something that I'm having to do a lot, like with the players here, because like small numbers, small resources, like not that much time to work with everyone, and like it used to be that everyone gets a little bit of time, whereas if we're actually going to do it successfully and produce top players, the players that are going to do that need more time, and they really need help and driven, and every session and not every session, but every day they are being asked challenging questions about their approach to what they're doing. And if I'm only seeing them like twice a week, 3 times a week in any sort of detailed way, then it's going to be really difficult to do that.
But if you've framed it and spent some time framing, then I get that. But if you spend some time framing and you get them to that point, what you find then is that it turbocharges the activity. So your quality in the limited time you have goes right through the roof. But you do have to spend time on it. It does take a while for this to become habitual. So you're constantly having to check back and say, hang on, and you sound a bit naggy sometimes, but you're just checking back, reframe, and you get to a point where it starts, you know it's working, right? Because, like, for example, you see that self-regulation taking place,
right.
And either the individual themselves or the peer group, you know, and then you're no longer having to take ownership of it. I mean, I had a team once, we got them promoted, and I knew it was working because we'd kept framing, and then, like, we'd be doing a kind of practice, and then they just literally just took themselves off. So, nah,
right.
Reset, start again. And you know, now we're in it, you know, and then you really start to go places. But I think for performance cultures, again, you know, I think a lot of people do stuff on culture, and they create a nice mission statement and all these sorts of things. It's behaviour, aggregation of behaviour.
Yeah.
And that ultimately that adds up to it. What you'll find is players will really buy it once they start to live and breathe it. They'll, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's good advice, actually.
But it does feel hard.
Well, that's it, because it's really easy just to say, like, okay, we haven't got that much time, let's jump on cart and let's get some really good stuff done, but that's all the squash stuff that we've probably already got.
We're not stepping foot on the court until we're in the right space. We've got to earn it, right? And we're not stepping foot on the court until we're in the right space to get on that court, because we've got to earn that space. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because otherwise we're just going to do something half.
Yeah, that's it. And that was totally what happened in the past, kind of the 18 months leading up to the Commonwealth Games. Like, it was just, we need to put the hours in, we need to get this done, and try to challenge them when they were in that environment a lot more than they'd ever been challenged before. But it was still very easy for them to just, like, go off and do the next thing, and because everything happens so fast, and there's always another point, always another game, always another match, just to keep going, then it doesn't really sink in as much. Whereas the route that I'm taking now is, like, every session we sit down for half an hour, 45 minutes before it, and really establish what it is that we're trying to achieve in the session, and why we want to achieve it, and how does the group feel about it, and all this type of stuff. And it's kind of what you're saying, like, and now I totally get that my, like, application of what happens after that needs to keep improving, because probably the first step will be me keep on challenging them on their behaviours, and then hopefully as they become more aware of it and they keep getting challenged, we reframe it again, then they'll start to take ownership of it a little bit more.
You'll probably find initially there's like a concertina effect, where some really stretch away and they go, yeah, I'm there, and others are still lagging behind, and they'll bring them back, and then, you know, but as long as you're generally moving in this direction, you'll start to.
How long would you, kind of, just from your experience, how long has it kind of taken to make those changes?
A whole season sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Depends.
So what stage
pop out, isn't it? Answer, but
I know. No, it's fine. At what stage would it be? Get to the point that you just like, right, this person can't be involved anymore?
You'll know that. You'll feel it.
Right.
And it might take you a little while. Actually, what you want to get to, and this is the great scenario, is, so Danny Kerry says this about the women's programme. He says he doesn't have to. So, like, you know, the All Black stuff about no dickheads.
Yeah.
So it's similar. He says he never has to deregulate. He never has to sort of get rid of anyone, because the group do it.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry. Now, you've got to be careful with that, because sometimes it can be a bit like, you know, a tribe not accepting a new member of the tribe, but actually they've talked about that cultural thing, and there's this welcoming piece, and you belong here from the start. You belong here until the moment you show that you don't. People self-select out. Yeah. This is something you might have to get comfortable with. There might be some casualties.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, and it's not like I'm quite comfortable with it, and we've had plenty. Like, I've been here 2 years now, and we've lost 5 or 6 players, and none of them have been through me saying you can't come back again.
Yeah.
But they have just had this realisation that this isn't for them anymore. They're not cut out for it, and just made the decision to leave, and that's absolutely fine. It's trying to balance the expectations of the governing body, the board, Sport Scotland, all these other people that are saying, well, we are judging your success on these factors, and it's I obviously want to be successful, but that making these types of changes do take time, and you'll have casualties on the way. Results might suffer as a consequence of it, because you're putting less emphasis on the stuff that they actually do in the cart to gain a bigger benefit that will bring it back into that.
I don't think you'll see a performance detriment.
Right. Okay.
I don't think you will, because what you're going to be doing really quite quickly is getting far greater quality out of each individual activity that you do. So you're just going to add value to what you do in terms of the court stuff.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect you to see a detriment. I mean, if, for example, you were to change your, you were used to use a radically new coaching philosophy, or bring about a huge technical change for somebody, then I would expect to see a performance detriment.
Yeah.
But this isn't that. This is really just saying, how are we going to operate when we come together?
Yeah.
What are we going to value? Are we going to value struggle, for example? You know, or are we going to come here and have a nice time and get a sweat on? You know, which is going to make us better. So what I'm saying is that I don't see the performance detriment potentially. That shouldn't be something you're fearful of.
Okay.
The casualties in terms of people, I think, interestingly for me, going back to your point earlier about people sort of opting out, I always think it's better to do that, and because why take them down a journey that's basically paved with disappointment, and they have to find out the disappointment in the most public and horrible way possible, and the potential emotional scars that come with that, versus saying to somebody, the place you're going, right, is going to look like this, it's going to feel like this. To get there, to earn the right to get there, you're going to have to do a lot. There's going to be sacrifice and pain, and I'm going to give you, and you're going to experience that, because that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Choose now, because or at any point it's not for you, that's fine, because I don't want you to get to that point and have the public kind of failure or whatever it is that might live with you forever. And I always think that we're avoiding doing that. I mean, particularly like the girls at the start of their talent journey, right? 6 of them have just come along because they think, it might be able we used to go and play for the county. And I'm saying to them, this place here, if you're going to you want to get to the next level, well, what we do here determines whether we get there. And if you're into that, by all means, we're having a great time together. But if you're not, well, let's have a think about what your future is.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that, because don't start. It doesn't matter how good you are. Don't start here, because at some point you're going to get found out.
Yeah.
And I see too many talented athletes who come along with great ability, but they don't have the internal stuff.
Yeah.
And it's that's what stops them. What we usually do is we get into a performance, then we put a psych on them. But I mean, my point is that I think it's part of our duty to make the athlete understand that what they're buying into is something that ordinary people don't do.
Yeah. So, following on from my question, following on from that was great. Is there anyone that you recommend that is like really good at that gets it, like from the type of things that I've talked about and from the areas that I'm working on with the group of players that I've got? Is there someone out there that you think like they do this really well and that could help?
Well, at the risk of this becoming the Mark Bennett fan club podcast, I've never seen anyone better, ever. I mean, I've watched him do it, right? So I got him with my team, and he sat him down and just started asking them questions, and just unbelievable, just instantaneous transformation. How the hell do you do that? He's a ninja. And I get zero benefit out of saying these things and recommending him in this way. It's not like I get a I should have some sort of kickback. But I don't get any of that. I just believe in it, I just passionately believe in it. It's transformative for me. It's been transformative in many aspects of my life. So I would definitely recommend him. There's another guy as well who I really found quite transformative as well, a guy called Jamie Edwards. Right. He's not been on the podcast yet. due to come on, hopefully. I went on a retreat, funnily enough, in somewhere in the Lake District somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. It was in the middle of nowhere, no phone signal. 3 days, immersive, and come away with quite a lot of realizations about myself, but also some good tools around how I can operate. Quite practical stuff, but useful stuff that's really helped me with helping unlock performance limitations and limiting beliefs and things like that.
Okay.
Some of it was a bit woo-woo. I don't mind telling you, but that's probably more about me. That says more about me than the content. Some interesting things there. It's not quite what we've talked about, but it's had a similar transformative effect on me. Although my wife might tell you that I probably need an upgrade again. But it'd be worth. I mean, Mark's doing some stuff, really interesting stuff with Reading. So Alan Keane, who was on the podcast a while back, basketball coach.
Right. Yeah.
He's now going to work with Alan because Alan's the head coach of the Reading Rockets now, and Mark's basically just embedded. So he's going to be their kind of like Gilbert Anoka character, who's there all the time, helping the coach and the players and instantly that. We're talking about potentially documenting it actually creating it'd be really cool if we could. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but he's going to need to record a lot of audio and I have to edit it up and create the narrative, but that would be really interesting. So I mean, if you can get hold of him, he's not the cheapest, to be honest with you, but if you can get hold of him, then it'd be worth just spending some time, maybe even helping him do the framing for you, or getting him to do framing, that kind of stuff, because he has got a knack of pulling out from you stuff,
right?
Or even just taking you through. I mean, he's got a masterclass event on in August, I think, that might be worth going to. Anyway, just
okay, that's cool. I think all these type of things, it's just what we've talked about, that lifelong pursuit of looking at different ways of doing things and trying new things out, and as you get more involved in working with at a higher level, you tend to realise that it's not the obvious stuff, it's not the game stuff that is
exactly.
The things that are making
you got the game stuff down. It's the other stuff.
And I think the key part of that is how can you, because the players of a sport always want to bring it back to the game stuff, they don't just want to be sat there, so how can you link in the information that you can get from all these other areas and then bring it back into what they're all about, which is the sport.
But the game stuff, the reason they do that is because that's where they're comfortable. They want to be in comfort. And the challenge for us is for them to always be in discomfort, and for them to get to love being in discomfort.
That's a great way of putting it.
Because human beings, we have a homeostasis, right? So we bring about change. But we always kind of want to get back to normality. It's kind of just built into our psyche. Everything about us, physiologically, everything always wants to try and come back to stasis. And I think our challenge is to say, we're never going to be in. At the minute it feels like that, that's when we've got to push again. Because that's what truly great performance athletes do. Always. Sometimes to their own detriment.
I've definitely seen that over the years in different ways. But I think if you've got that mentality and with a bit of direction, that's the optimum, isn't it?
It is,
what you're looking for.
And it's a developable quality. And people will thank you for it. Even though they might not at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's one of the difficult parts with these types of ideas, is that sometimes you need to be the bad guy in the moment to be the good guy in the overall aspect of it.
But interestingly, what changes in terms of when you create this cultural framework as well is you're not really the bad guy. You're just the person asking the question about what it is that people want and having honest conversations. And I think that's a change, because again, I know exactly where you're coming from when you say that, because this is where I'm coming from. I don't like being the bad guy. I like to be liked. It's my probably biggest failure. But what I found is over the years is that when I'm trying to be liked, that people don't get it. It's when I'm like not trying to be liked, if you like, and I'm being really honest with people, that I get a far deeper connection with them.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Again, counterintuitive. But and I think it's because over a period of time, either through the adversity or whatever it is, they really begin to recognise the value of the approach you're taking and the difficulty it has, because on a human level it's really hard.
Yeah.
Which is why most of us don't do it.
100%. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. Fantastic conversation. I was absolutely blown away. Just hearing Paul's story about the way he kind of, grafted his way to the position that he's in. He's still a relatively young coach to be in a national role like that. But you can just feel kind of oozing out of him the drive and the passion and the search for continuous improvement and making things better. And we just had a really great conversation. It was really inspiring to be with somebody who just has that level of passion and hunger for learning. And all power to him. Really enjoyed it. I'll be keeping my eye on the development of Scottish squash going forward. Looking forward to seeing how those guys develop. In the meantime, Conclave is closed. Got 3 or 4 people have jumped on board and joined in, so I'll be giving them a shout out in the next episode. But in the meantime, have a great week of coaching. Sorry I was late this week. A little bit of stuff going on up in Scotland, but back hopefully on the schedule with bringing out the podcast. But in the meantime, have a great week, and remember, ditch those drills.